Serious, Reddit, what is the scariest thing, paranormal, that has happened to you? I used to play with a boy down the street. I remember this kid so vividly. Whatever I was playing that day, he would just join in and play until I was called in. Every time I mention this kid to my family, they all tell me that I used to play by myself all the time. We had a kitchen chair that would move. Just one. They would normally all be pushed in, and this one would barely be pushed out, some days almost like someone was sitting in it but not that far back. We knew it was a ghost who liked the chair because we could see it from the living room and saw it move/heard it move on the floor once. It wasn't a big movement, it was small, but it definitely moved, and then my mom and I heard it move another time when it was just us in the kitchen. And sure enough, when we turned around, it was sticking out. It wasn't a scary ghost, just kinda weird and almost funny. Whispering in the house at like 2 a.m. I followed it from the basement, where my room was, a few times, and it would pause when I stood under the attic entrance. Never went in though. So in my dream I was outside my grandma's home. She was dead when this happened. I saw her smiling creepily and standing near the door. Her hair was also weird, like here and there and sticking up too. I didn't mind it until one day, early morning, I was outside my house and up above roof I saw a full black figure sitting more like in a toddler crawling position, and it was gone the next moment. The weird thing was, it had the same haircut. And another time I was home alone, I came from a shower and was wiping my face when I saw a hand, again full black, on my shoulder, but obviously no one was there. To this day, I don't know what to think of it. Not even sure if it's paranormal or my brain playing tricks, lol. I always repost this in response to threads like this. I always tell the story of how I got into ghost hunting. Years ago, I was dating a girl at the beginning of the ghost hunters craze, about 2005-ish. She got really into it and I thought it was bonkers dumb, but I loved her, so who cares? She tells me her family owns a large plot of land with a haunted house, and if I'd like to record it overnight to see if we pick up anything. The location, Schulenburg, Texas, is located halfway between Houston and San Antonio. The girlfriend's family owned a huge tract of land there, acres upon acres. We arrived that morning to get an early start and explore the land so I could get familiar with it. The entirety of the land was fenced, as rural Texas owners are wont to do, across the entirety of its boundaries. Entry was far off the main road, down a long stretch of dirt and gravel path through trees and bushes. Once through the gate, you emerged at the wood house. The wood house was the newest of the homes built on the property and served as the main house for family and a sometimes guest house. It had a TV but no cable, plus 2 stories. With an open layout and large, welcome windows, it had all the accoutrements of a modern home minus cell phone signal or cable. This would be my home and home base for the next 2 nights. Outside, I was introduced to the golf cart, which was necessary to navigate the huge swaths of land that would otherwise take an hour or more to traverse on foot. After lunch, her mother stayed behind while we loaded up and departed for the brick house. The brick house was another modern structure built on the opposite point of land, with an outside wooden deck that looked out onto descending hills and provided an amazing view of the countryside. With a jacuzzi built on the deck and a TV inside, we enjoyed some time making sure the jacuzzi was operating and clean, just in case we wanted to use it. Then we loaded up into the golf cart for our final destination, the stone house. During the years after the Civil War, my girlfriend told me, local legend was that a bugle player had shot himself through the mouth after coming down with some sort of cancer or tumor. There were records of this, she claimed, although I never saw them. Still, I took it on good faith. The structure itself was half modern, half Civil War period. The modern side was wood and electrically powered but connected to the original Civil War structure. You could tell the difference immediately stepping into the Civil War side. The floor was built of large hewn stone that looked ripped from a rock quarry. The wooden door was made of ancient wood and felt like it took incredible effort to push open. The Civil War side was essentially one continuous room with a doorway connecting the living room to the bedroom. The bedroom was like a prison cell. Stepping inside, there was a tiny bed to your left and a dresser to your right. You could turn left and right but not move, only lie down on the bed. Visitors who had slept overnight at the house told stories about it, stories about knocks on the door in the middle of the night and scratching on the floors. That day, in late afternoon, I set up on a tripod a mini DV video camera with tapes that needed to be replaced after 4 hours of continuous video. We set it up in the living room facing the bedroom. The camera stared directly out the back window of the bedroom, a small, pathetic thing that provided only a meager view of the outside. Heavy curtain had been set on a recently installed rod to separate the two rooms, so I made sure to pull the curtain open. It was heavy, with the thickness of a rug or extremely sturdy blanket, then left with my girlfriend and her sister. Before we left, we looked into the camera and made mocking gestures as I proclaimed we're the Ghostbusters. An easy joke, a silly one to end a silly project as we turned the camera on and left for the evening. As we were driving away, I suddenly got an anxious feeling that we hadn't turned the camera on. We quickly zipped back to make sure, made one last silly pose and proclamation of being Ghostbusters, then returned to the wood house before the sun could go down. Daylight was coming to an end. I remember, as we sat around the living room of the wood house, my girlfriend's mother telling us that we had left the light on in the stone house. Of course we hadn't. We'd never needed to turn it on in the first place. It had been daylight hours. But, as we gathered around the window overlooking the land below, I realized that, indeed, the light was on, and so, we clambered into the golf cart and zipped back to the stone house. Sure enough, the light was on. Strange, I thought, but there had been 3 of us. Any one of us could have turned the light on. But, with it turned off, the house fell into pitch blackness. If you've never left the big city behind or traveled into the country without any nearby town, there's a deep darkness that settles on the land. It was made worse as we stood in that house, that small, claustrophobic house. For the first time since we had arrived, I realized why people might see or hear things while sleeping there. The house was small, like a tomb, and standing in the living room in absolute darkness was terrifying. I quickly ushered everyone out and we zoomed back to the wooden house. Joy returned as we sat around, telling stories and playing games while we enjoyed dinner. I remembered why I didn't believe in ghosts, and enjoyed the rest of the night with people I cared for. The video review. We returned to the house periodically throughout the night to switch out tapes but gave up sometime after 2 in the morning. I didn't really think we would catch anything, after all, and the girlfriend was sleepy. We collected the tapes and spent the next day relaxing on the land before returning to my home at the end of the weekend. The evening of our return, the girlfriend opted to make margaritas while I watched the tapes. It was one of those apartments you get in college, small but not too small, with a living room connected directly to the kitchen. She could see me as I sat on the couch and reviewed the tapes. Well, fast-forwarded through the tapes. I knew I wouldn't find anything. I've done a lot of ghost hunting over the years since then, and when you do see stuff or catch things, it's never what people want. It's never a full body of a dead man or some ghastly apparition appearing. And, even on that first day I ever spent reviewing, I didn't catch anything like that either. But I do remember fast-forwarding, while the tape was still playing, just to get through nothing happening as fast as possible. And I do remember the moment I paused the video, wondering what was going in with the camera. Some of you may have never used a videotape camera before, if you're over a certain age. When you fast-forward while it's playing, you see static lines. The image jumps a little, but the image was jumping not just a little, but a lot. So I paused it and rewound the tape. On video, you could see us all on tape, me shouting about how we're Ghostbusters, and then the sound of the door closing as we left. Then, outside, the sound of our golf cart as it roared to life, and then the fading noise of us leaving. But what I'll never forget is the music. The single, solemn, mid-tone that started to play. Not quite whistling, not quite a wind instrument. Then the low tone, deeper and bass-filled. Then the high-pitched tone that started to ring out as the camera started to wobble and jump. I didn't know what I was watching. I called for the girlfriend, who put the margarita mix away and came into the room to see why I was sounding scared. I rewound the tape and we both watched and heard the same music and shaking of the camera. Do you remember me saying that we returned because I thought I had forgotten to turn the camera on? In the far background, I hear the noise of our golf cart returning and, as we pulled up, the sounds and motion of the camera all coming to a stop. I watched as we came back inside, I checked the film, we did another silly pose, and then roared away again, and, again, a few minutes after you could no longer hear the golf cart. The music, again, starting with that low tone and progressing through highs and lows as the camera started to wobble up and down, the screen jumping until the image vanished for a second in a wash of static lines. When the image returned, the music had stopped. We reviewed photos we took that day. There are strange auras of light around us, but that could be merely light tricks. The music though. I will never forget the music. Not just me but my family has this weird thing where if someone close to us passes away, one of us has a dream about them the night they died. It could be years since we had seen them but would still dream about them. My aunt dreamed of her husband the night he died. My dad dreamed about a family friend who was basically a second grandmother to us on my mom's side the night she passed away, and I dreamed of both my aunt the night she died, this past January, and my great-grandmother when she died. I was 6. I have been wanting to share this story to Reddit for a long time and I am just getting the chance to sit down and put this experience into words. I am unsure if anyone will see this but if you do and have any possible idea or theory as to what I saw, please let me know. I also want to add that I am not the best writer, but I am going to try my best to paint a clear picture of what I saw. This experience is 100% true and is the most frightening event to ever happen to me. Mostly because I have yet to think of a realistic explanation. I live in upstate New York and my family owns around 10 acres of land surrounded by field and woods. I have always had experiences growing up in this house. Maybe more stories to come but anyway. It was late at night, close to 1 to 2 a.m. when this occurred. I have a window at the end of my bed that has an AC in. It's about 8 feet from my window to the grass below. My cat, Hudson, loves to jump up on open windows and lay across and press against the screen. This night, he had decided to jump up on that open window. I had totally forgot the screen to my window was out due to the AC. I didn't realize this until I heard Hudson hissing and screeching at something outside the window. I assumed it was some sort of animal, maybe a raccoon, and tried to call him in. Suddenly, he had fallen out the window and started screeching. I have never heard him make a sound like this before and jump out of bed to go outside and get him. I went to my little brother's room to have him help me go find my cat. I was really nervous because he's gotten out before and has been missing for days on end, so my fear of the dark was thrown out the window in this moment. I had my flashlight on and sprinted out the door and went to the side of the house where my window was. I made the turn and shined my flashlight on the area. What I saw was not my cat but a 7 to 8 feet figure trying to scale the walls of my house and reach into my open window. One of the creature's back legs were pressed against the house while the front legs had a hold of my windsill. The creature noticed my flashlight and looked in my direction. It had deep red eyes that kept me frozen in my spot. The creature stared me straight in the eyes and proceeded to let go of the house and move towards the field on the side. But it didn't go on all fours. Whatever this thing was stood on its back legs and ran quickly into the field. In the darkness, I was able to make out what looked like a set of horns or antlers on this thing's head. Its height on its back legs was at least 7 to 8 feet tall and did not look at all like a human. Its posture was slightly hunched over, and its arms swayed to the side of it as it moved. They hung close to the level of what I guess would be its knees. My little brother was in the front of the house looking for my cat, so I went to grab him and help me look in the field the creature ran into. At this point, I think my adrenaline was going so fast I didn't completely process what I had seen. We got close to the field and saw absolutely nothing, no cat or creature. We made our way back to the front to look for my cat on the other side of the house. Without saying anything, my brother and I froze. We both looked towards the trees and bushes at the side of the house and saw them rustling. We heard this painfully loud shrieking, and we booked it to the front door. I have no idea if what we heard was that creature or some other animal, but I had an awful gut feeling standing in that driveway. It wasn't safe and I couldn't have my brother out there. I locked the door quickly and went to the back porch sliding door and saw my cat waiting at the door to be let in. He is the type to escape and be out for days with no issue. He has never once just come to the back door after getting out. He looked scared. His tail was the bushiest I have ever seen, and the poor thing was shaking. He ran inside and stayed away from the windows and doors the rest of the night. I have only told this story in this much detail to my boyfriend, and even then, it is so difficult to explain what I had seen, heard, and felt that night. The gut feeling that something is not right, and we could be in serious danger was nothing I have felt before until that night. The most memorable part of that experience was the feeling I got when the creature stared into my soul with those ugly, deep red eyes. I have nightmares about this event, and I see its eyes often when I close mine. It took me so long to process and analyze what I had seen, but the closest I can describe this creature and its stature is if you search up Wendigo depictions. I am not completely sure if it was a Wendigo, but I do live fairly close to so-called Wendigo territory in New York. The whole experience freaks me out thinking about it and thought I'd finally share. I've told this story a few times, but I'll tell it again. The story is called The Door to Hell, Portland, Oregon 1994. In the area of southeast Portland, just a hair south of Flavel SD. and 52nd, was an old historic mansion. It had that semi-Addams Family vibe to it. This place was so haunted. The stories are already long, and each one could be its own tale, so I'll bullet point below. If you'd like more details, ask in a reply. In church, I'd play with the kid in the pew behind myself and grandparents. We sat in the floor or under the seats. I was no more than 5 to 6, and we'd silently color and eat the candy my grandma would give me. When mentioning the boy to my grandparents, they told me no such boy existed in our church. I'd play and color alone. From 9 to 12, I was friends with that boy. Blonde hair, deep blue eyes, fair skin. We would climb trees, talk, laugh, run in the woods behind my grandparents' house. Come my 18th birthday, my parents no longer can forbid it, so I start to look for him and find his grandparents' phone number and ring them. I explain the situation. I was playing with their grandson as a child and would like to reconnect. He died while on holidays with them at 12 years old, in 1990. I wasn't even born yet. Went to trip some haunted places in the UK with a friend who brought a Boo Bear. That piece of SHD would start talking while we would be asleep or giggle for no reason. We would find it in different places in the morning, left on the couch, found by the door, or even in the bathtub once. I buried my baby brother 9 years ago. I was numb. Just numb. I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I felt a finger brush my cheek and heard a familiar, comforting voice encouraging me when everyone left. I could feel them carry me by the waist and support me physically. They stayed with me that day, and I felt a loving, warm, reassuring touch multiple times. I recently talked about it with my aunt, who assured me that no one was with me that day. They could see me leaning towards something or talking to someone, without anyone actually being there. Some kids in my primary school did the Charlie game. A girl's desk flipped over. I remember it being really weird because we had those metal desks that only seat one. If they were pushed, the desks landed on their sides, but when the girl's desk was flipped, it landed on its top, the actual desk part you wrote on. I think we all ran out screaming after that, and we had to get the school blessed. There was also a lot of worry about the demon sticking to someone, i.e. the girl whose desk was flipped over. There were a lot of conflicting reports over how to get rid of the demon. Some people said you had to read the entire Bible to get rid of it, others said you had to burn the paper you played the game on, etc. Some of those primary school friends ended up in secondary school with me. They validated that we all saw the same SHD that day. It's part of the reason I would never toy around with stuff like Ouija boards, or summoning spirits. No thank you. I was trying to fall asleep after a stressful day at his funeral of my cousin who committed suicide at the age of 14. So I was lying on my bed with the lights on because I was afraid to sleep in the darkness that day. I was still awake when suddenly the door opened and my uncle, who died long ago, entered the room. I didn't see my uncle, but somehow I knew it was him. He sat on the edge of the bed where I was lying. I wanted to raise my head and look at him, but he pushed my head towards the pillow with his hand. I understood he didn't want me to see him. When I still lived with my parents, I'd wake up at least one time a year to a shadow figure standing over me. Moved into an apartment with my fiancée for years now, seen it 3 times in this place. When my grandfather passed away a while back, all this stuff started happening that I could only connect to him. He loved cardinals, and some cardinals made a nest in a tree right near our house. A bunch of his favorite songs started coming on over the radio. We even started finding tools and stuff around the house that we never knew we had, which I connected to him since he was heavily into woodworking and carpentry. Just all these small things that could only be connected to him. I also get sleep paralysis sometimes, and every time it's like a paranormal experience. I can't find the words to describe it. You'd have to experience it to know what I'm talking about. I stayed over at a friend's house when we were both 8 years old. I was moving to another part of the country, so it was going to be our last day and night together. I don't remember much of what we did, but I guess it was a pretty normal day. Sometime during the night I woke up to go to the toilet. I got up carefully so as not to make any noise and opened the bedroom door. In the darkness of the house I could make out some kind of humanoid shadow walking down the hallway. I rubbed my eyes, confused, and when I looked again, it was gone. I went to wake my friend and told her what had happened. After a pause, she confessed to me that she had been feeling the atmosphere in her house strange for a few days. That was the end of it, as her mother had to hear my loud footsteps as I went back into the room and asked us to go back to bed. From time to time I write to her and ask her about that night, but she says she doesn't remember anything, not even the strange atmosphere she said there was. I have more stories, each one more chilling, but they may seem too unreal to tell, so I've decided to tell this not-so-scary one. Marshville, North Carolina, 2008. My then-girlfriend lived in a very secluded and rural area and I lived about 45 minutes away. I drove county roads as much as I could to avoid highways, less traffic lights, stops, etc., and this was a daily drive for almost 2 years. I always took the same road and knew every inch of it by heart. It was mostly a straight stretch of road except one area where it banked right up a hill, and as soon as it crested it banked back downhill left. Very few houses along the way and a fair amount of tree growth, so it was quite dark. Never once had I encountered anything out of the ordinary. There was rarely even other vehicles traveling. The most signs of life I ever saw was an occasional deer in the distance. However, one late summer evening I was headed home around 2 a.m., cruising around 40 miles per hour down that same road. Got to the hill, made the first bank to the top, and as turned into down bank, I saw it, a humanoid shape, cloaked in shadows. No discerning features, and oddly my headlights barely illuminated it. This thing was just floating there, resembling how ink spreads through water. This was all I could make out before I realized I wouldn't be able to stop in time to avoid it. I white-knuckled the steering wheel, clenched my jaw and squinted my eyes as I had no idea what I was about to mow down. At the moment my bumper would have collided with solid matter, the black mass dissipated away. Yet I felt an ice-cold rush through the center of my car. My dash lights failed but the throttle jerked in sudden burst of acceleration. I didn't bother even glancing in the rearview mirror. I was frozen in disbelief of what I had encountered. The dash lights flickered back on and I took the first available turn to bright lights of the highway. I sped into gas station parking lot and pulled up onto the pump overhang, basking in the warm fluorescent glow and trying to slow my heart rate. I immediately called my girlfriend to tell her what had happened, but didn't get an answer. I was relieved at first, thinking maybe my imagination had pulled one over on me and I didn't see anything at all. Saved me from sounding like a raving lunatic to her. So I went into the station to buy some smokes, convincing myself the dark really does play tricks, and wrote off the mishaps with my car as it was aged and flawed. But as I made my way back outside my fears began to rekindle. From a distance I noticed something on the front bumper, and as I got closer I realized it was on the hood as well. It looked like frost, a wide strip of white frost across the center of hood, grille and bumper. It was 78.0 outside, there's no way that could be. Against my better judgment I reached out to touch it. It was definitely cold, but more odd was that it was slimy. It melted into a goo substance as I felt it and stuck to my fingertips as I pulled my hand away. I just stood there for a few minutes and watched as it melted, congealed, then slowly dripped down and off the car. I have no idea what any of it was, and for a long time told myself it didn't happen. Kept it to myself and made up weird excuses to my girl and friends why I wouldn't drive that road anymore after midnight. A few years went by until one night I was drinking with a close friend and decided to spill the whole story. He explained to me that him and his family had lived in the area for years, and while what I experienced was shocking, it didn't surprise him in the least. He told me his parents and grandparents had shared similar stories, and they always just said Old Scratch was out tonight. Have this friend who and her mom are very witchy-like. Her mom is one scary woman. They had this extremely big and old expensive house. I went and stayed with them one summer. Probably like 17 to 18. We get there, the house is wonderful. They are bringing us through all the rooms and get to this one room where they tell us never to open it. Like, come on, fast forward a week. No one's gone in. But all the bathrooms in the house are being used. Except for the one that's in this room. So I think nothing of it. Go and get to the bathroom and start taking a leak. Now, when I tell you I felt this absolute chilling thing grab my shoulder, and it was big. Like felt fingers down the front of my chest while it's sitting on my shoulder big. I freeze. After what seemed like forever. I heard my name. Clicked back to reality, finished my business, walked out. Found out I was in there for over 40 minutes. Fast forward a few more days. I go out to stand in the pool at like 1130 at night. Standing in the pool, with my phone, I know, dumb idea, when it happens again. Something grabs my shoulder, and I freeze. Dropped my phone straight in the water, and apparently stood there for over 2 hours till someone came out and found me. To this day, now almost 30, I still probably twice a year, not for hours at a time but only a few minutes, it still happens. I'm all over the place with my words, I'll try my best. Also, I've posted stories like this elsewhere. Sorry if you somehow see a duplicate. When I was younger, I was a smoker. I mean a pretty heavy, and I don't just mean my weight, one at that. At the time, my grandmother also smoked. It was either a few days before or after Christmas because I remember the tree was up. My cousin lived down the street a few houses down from me, coincidentally. This was a night where he was sleeping over. We would get to play on the PlayStation. Which would be a great night, or so we thought. My grandparents were both sleeping at this point in time since it was pretty late. We both smoked and my grandmother smoked Sonoma regular 100s. They were her favorite brand before she quit smoking. Well, my cousin and I had a brilliant idea to go upstairs while she was asleep to nab ourselves a good old-fashioned cancer stick from her pack. We went up the stairs, being quiet like mice. When we reached the door, I pushed the door open. Of course it was me to open the door. Because it was my house he was staying at, right? Wonderful. Continuing on, I pushed open the door trying to keep it quiet. As soon as the door swung open, a black figure jumped at us. It was like a real-life horror movie jump scare. We all love them. But this? No. It made us both nearly crap ourselves. We bolted back down the stairs, ignoring the idea to stay quiet at this point. Once we were in another room, away from the stairs altogether, we were both pale. We both saw it. It wasn't one of those times where one of us would see something. Whatever it was, it showed itself to both of us. That'll teach us to keep smoking and try to take a cigarette again. We dubbed what we saw that night the Christmas demon. Pretty creepy stuff. When my older brothers were children, I wasn't born yet, they were playing with my dad's car keys. One of my brothers, who was 2 at the time, hid the keys and couldn't remember where he had put them. And they used to live in a small village where they had animals like sheep, chickens, turkeys, a cow, all living in the same yard in front of the house. Finding the keys was basically mission impossible. After spending the whole day looking for the keys, the search was unsuccessful. So they all went to sleep that night, and my grandma had a dream in which her grandfather told her to look for the keys in the little house where the hydrophore was. The next morning they went to see, and boom, the keys were there. I honestly believe my grandma had this gift of seeing things we couldn't. My great-grandma and I were really close. She lived in the countryside, so we would only visit her once a month. The one time I decided to skip the visitation, she passed literally the day after. As you can imagine, I was pretty upset at her funeral, so I decided go for a walk to clear my head a little bit. Mind you, it was nighttime. I wasn't planning on going too far as I didn't want it to get lost. Suddenly a little girl showed up in front of me and started running towards the cemetery entry. I did the most illogical thing and started following her. I swear she was so white she glowed in the dark. My dad saw me running towards there and stopped me to ask me WTF I thought I was doing. I pointed to the little girl. He said there was no one else with me, and when I turned around to check, she was gone. I told my parents about what happened on the way back to our house, but they decided grief was making me hallucinate. I forgot about that episode until recently. We went visiting my great-aunt, my great-grandma's kid, and she pulled out an old family album. I was going through the photos when I saw the exact same little girl from the cemetery. I asked her who that was and she told that was her youngest sister. She died after an accidental drowning when she was 8. My great-grandma was making dinner when she snuck out to play with some friends and ended up drowning herself by accident at the river nearby. The creepiest part? We have the same name. Mind you, my mom didn't know about this kid until that day, so this was not a tribute or anything. I also am terrified of water since the day I was born. I still can't wash my hair without a towel by my side. When the water runs through my face I feel suffocated. I went fishing one night and on my way back to the vehicle at about 1 a.m., I had my headlamp on and I was walking on the trail and something caught my eye in front of me, and as I looked up, there was a man walking towards me with jeans, a white vest, blue shirt unbuttoned, and had his fishing bag and rod slung over his shoulder. I stopped dead and he carried on walking and went straight through me. Lived in a house with a few ghosts, a little girl, a dog and an old man. Some days I would walk into my room and all my cupboards and drawers would be wide open. I saw the old man sitting at the base of my bed one night and the little girl was from the swimming pool. She drowned there and didn't like people being in the pool after sunset. The dog would bark when someone rang the doorbell and it would urinate on my dad's bedroom carpet. You could stand there and watch the puddle forming. The rubbish bin would open and close all night, rather loudly. My brother also used to be attacked and used to have scratches all over his body. He would stand in front of the mirror and see and feel the scratches forming. Used to feel the spirits climbing on and off my bed some nights. My brother and I have always seen and felt supernatural spirits. We can even drive past a house and tell you if it has something inside it. Wish I could communicate with the dead though, one day. One time in 4th grade summer, my friend had a birthday party sleepover with a bunch of people that I was friends with. We were going to sleep in the living room because it was pretty big, so everybody got their things set up and we were sitting on the couch talking when I look in the kitchen, which connects to the living room by a small hallway. The kitchen was pitch black and all you could see was the fridge. So I look into the kitchen and behind the fridge I saw long fingers curl around the fridge with huge claw-like nails, and a head poking around, with 2 red eyes just staring at me. After staring at it for around 10 seconds I get a feeling of pure fear, and ever since I felt like something was always with me, or I was being watched by those red, piercing eyes that made you frozen in fear. I work as a kitchen porter in the top floor of a really old building, built around early to mid-1800s. The kitchen is small compared to other restaurants' kitchen, but it's big enough to store everything and have plenty of room. Our restaurant offers a service called tipsy tea where we serve stuff you would normally get in a high tea but in a bird cage that has 3 shelves to put on the plates of foods. These cages are stored on the other side of the kitchen, hanging on hooks opposite to the area where I mainly work. We had a really busy rush come in and afterwards it died down, so we were able to take a small breather before the next rush of dishes came up. I was in my area with my back to the cages sorting out a few final things in the dishwasher when I felt something hit my leg with hard force. I turned round and looked down and one of the bird cages was laying on the floor. At first I thought someone threw it at me to clean it, but nobody was in that area. The 2 chefs were in the walk-in fridge which was beside my area and the other KP was in the chef's area which is again near my area, so the only way that cage could have been thrown at me was if some paranormal force used extreme strength to lift the cage of its hooks and then launch in across the room to me. To say I was freaked out was an understatement, but since then a lot of strange things have been happening in the building. Didn't happen to me, but one of my co-workers. He was working the overnight shift in our mid-rise senior living facility. He took the elevator to the 11th floor. When the door opened there was a woman in a white lace gown. She was barefoot, and he had never seen her before. He greeted her as he exited the elevator. She responded and walked inside the elevator. He goes down to check the cameras and he is talking to himself. This makes him freak out. Fast forward 2 years. I see something interesting in the monthly scribble and sketch the occupants make for the building. A man had put in the comments section, "I wish you all could see the woman in the white lace dress at night in the elevator. She is quite lovely." I showed this to my coworker. He said, "See, I'm not crazy. I have a bunch of other stories from that building that are pretty good. Some happened to me and my other coworkers." Spoiler alert for the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. There is a scene in this movie where a priest is exorcising the demons out of Emily Rose in a barn. He demands to know the demon's name, because when you know a demon's name, you have power over it. So, the priest asks Emily Rose, the demon, "What is your name?" To which Emily Rose, the demon, responds with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. To suggest that there are actually 6 demons inside Emily Rose, not just one. He repeats the questions, unsure of the answers, to which the demon replies 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Immediately after she said it the second time, I got a call on my phone from 0012-3456. This was back before smartphones, when my flip phone was the coolest thing on the market and our only option for number retrieval/lookup was the operator in 69. I never figured out who or what called me. I googled it recently and discovered that Skype can appear like that, but this was long before Skype was ever invented. 2 other people were there. It remains unexplained to this day. 7th grade, and I had a dollar bill in my transparent pencil pouch that was in my school folder. and I was gonna use it in the candy machine. Except it disappeared. I opened my folder to get a pencil, looked at the pouch, and it just wasn't there. At all, and it didn't get taken or lost, since I had to open the zipper on that pouch to get the pencil, and I saw it at the end of the previous class when I put my pencil in the pouch, and obviously zipped it up, but that's not the paranormal part. Middle of class I had to get another something out of the pouch, and it was there again, in all its folded cash glory. I was confused, but happy that it was back. Went through the rest of class and at the end, opened my folder to put the things away. And the dollar was gone. I know I had seen it after it left, and that it was definitely back before it left again. But I have no idea what happened. I either hallucinated it in the middle of class for 12 seconds, or it flipped dimensions out, back, and out again. Or I did. One of the weird things in my life is seeing something exactly where I left it to come back to it gone and never returning. Has happened multiple times since then. I kinda hope, if it is me flipping, is that I flipped into the good dimension during all those. At maybe 12 to 12:30ish there was a noise coming from my living room that sounded like a moan almost. After that I heard eerie high-pitched child laughter and a lady saying "Go to sleep, Lily." This one wasn't me but my cousin. We were at a cabin for a week in the Ozarks and he woke me up at maybe around 4 describing what had just happened. He said that the ceiling fan turned on when no one else was in the room and the lights above the counter started flicking and he saw a shadow that looked like a person walking towards the couch as we were sleeping on. Multiple stories about one house I grew up in. These are the most memorable. One house I lived in when I was a teenager. Had stuff go flying off a wall shelf unit. Helium balloons we had left over from a party would somehow teleport around the house despite having no path of getting ahead of you. It would be in one room on the second floor, then all of a sudden in the laundry room is the basement bobbing up and down like it was being tugged on. I was alone there one night and decided to go out. Locked the house up and parents were at our boat over an hour drive away. I came home to the dining room chairs stacked up along with other kitchen items in a magnificent way leaning against a ceiling fan. I would routinely see the light in the hallway turn on and feet shadows under my closed door walking back and forth at night despite hearing both my parents snoring in their room. The worst was one night I had a couple friends over and I lived in the basement apartment of this house at this time. We heard the doorknob to outside start jiggling. Not expecting anyone, I went over and flung the door open to find no one there. This doorknob giggling kept happening and us all being too freaked out just ignored it. After a while, there was pounding in all the walls around us, just going in a circle around us. My friends decided to leave. I was left alone for the rest of the night hearing footsteps walking up and down the stairs to my basement apartment. Later on we had a tenant take up that basement apartment. He would say he would routinely see an old lady just standing and staring at him down there. I think my house is haunted. The first time I've got to be home alone overnight it was a very peaceful night. I was watching TV when I suddenly heard some footsteps on the stairs in my house. My bedroom door was unlocked and I was really afraid to get out of bed to go lock it. After some minutes I heard some breathing from here. I know for sure I was home alone. My parents were out of town. After 1 or 2 years I went in the yard. I think I was alone that night too and I was recording the lake I have in my yard. When I got in my room I was watching the recording and I was hearing, again, breathing. I know for sure it wasn't mine because when I was recording I had that thought I better stop breathing so it wouldn't be heard in the recording and so did I. I stopped breathing when I recorded. After a couple of months I was laying in my bed, not moving and suddenly a loud sound came out of my bed and my bed moved. My parents weren't in the house. FML. I always suspected my place of being haunted. One day when I was home my phone kept falling on the floor. Whenever I walked out of the room I would hear a thump and it would be my phone in the middle of the room. This happened about 3 times during the day. Right before I went to bed I put my phone on my nightstand and as I was walking out of the room I heard a bang on the wall. I walked in the room and my phone was once again on the floor. I picked up my phone and put it back on my nightstand and said out loud, "If something's here," pushed my phone on the floor again. I literally watched my phone slide across my nightstand and fall on the floor. I was completely shook. I put my phone back on the nightstand and asked again to push my phone and it happened again. If rent wasn't so cheap I would be out of here. Mine isn't too bad and I'm not much of a believer in paranormal stuff, but I have one. I was running Spotlight for a musical at my college. The cats where the lights were ran across the room above the audience, and stopped at the proscenium arch, where there was a door that led to the fly rail. Basically, the person running the flies never left that room and can't be seen by anyone. At the end of Act 1, I swore I saw something move in the cats. I was running spot from the audience, but chalked it up to the big set moving and catching my eye. Then, I hear over my headset my SM say, "Hey, fly op, is that you and the cats?" In the background I heard the light board op say, "You saw that too?" Suddenly a loud screech came through our headsets and they stopped working right. I was shaking so bad, my spotlights were not still after that lull. I get backstage after that act and find out everyone in the booth saw someone move in the cats, as well as our costumer in the audience. We sent people to look but saw nothing. I felt terrible for the fly op, he was terrified but couldn't leave. That night I had a nightmare someone was chasing me and the cats. Worst part was I was the student worker for the lighting shop, meaning I spent a lot of time alone up there working, which used to be fine until that day. My last day I worked as fast as possible to get my stuff done so I could get out of there. For purposes of this post, you'll call this first location the first location. I was at a paranormal investigation set up in an old house, won't give name because it will give my location away. There was 5 of us sitting in the addition on the first floor where the last owner took her last breath in. We were listening to the history when from above, we heard it, footsteps, walking back and forth, the light swinging overhead with the force. All 5 of us were in this room and nobody else was in the home. It was bizarre. We decided to head upstairs but left a bell on the bed, letting the supposed ghost that if she wanted us, she can ring the bell. As we headed up the very narrow and steep stairs to the second story, what did we hear? The bell. We stood there all in the stairway, trying to decide either to search upstairs for the footprints or go back to room we left the bell. We didn't want to split up because then any footsteps above or below would have to be discounted as it could easily be us. We decided to check the bell then go up. There was other things that happened in that house. Some people claimed to have been touched or felt hands on them. We would hear scratches or whispers and footprints above us, if on first floor, or below us, if on second story, sometimes. On the second story, I did do an investigation by myself while everybody was outside as I wanted pictures but nothing happened. I went back here 2 times and got some EVPs but the bell was the craziest thing from that location. The second location will be called the theater. This was the last investigation I had with this paranormal group before the tragedy happened, car accident not related to anything paranormal. We lost 50% of the group in this. This theater still haunts my dreams. Something yanked on my necklace and the boiler almost blew up. My voice recorder suddenly went off without me touching it, not once, but 3 times, the last time without batteries in it. I got separated from the others in the basement tunnels and found myself facing a shadow of a person standing before me, could have been reflections. When leaving, I suddenly felt very ill and had to pull over to throw up and as I left the city, I got suddenly blurry. There was an overall sense of dread feeling, like if I didn't get out, something was going to happen. Back at home, my neck had scratches from where my necklace was pulled and my arm was bruised. I think spirits can feast on vulnerability and during the theater investigation, I was very vulnerable due to an encounter with a man as I was walking from my car to the theater. So I think that shook me so much, I opened myself to paranormal and the paranormal loves to fuck with weak individuals. So it chose me to mess with. At the first location, I wasn't stressed at all and able to keep my mental health strong and therefore the paranormal chose to focus on those who had opened and vulnerable minds. I still try to go on as many paranormal investigations that I can get my hands onto. I managed to be a part of a non-taped investigation with the ghost hunters in Kentucky, one on ghost tours in London and Hawaii and Poland. I plan on visiting Waverly Hills and other haunted hotspots, but I'll never ever go back to that theater. Even for $1 million, I experienced what it had to offer and feel satisfied that there is no further business I have with that place. However, with the first location, I feel we have become good acquaintances and I can't wait for my next visit. I feel like I haven't experienced everything that place had to offer, so until I do, I don't mind dropping in and saying hi. When I was 4 years old I was scared of dark and wanted to sleep with my mom. One night I was laying in bed and pretending to be asleep. Then I saw somebody coming in the bathroom. It's usually my mom or dad when they go shower. I couldn't say who it was because my face was looking straight at the pillow and I barely saw someone enter the bathroom. As I was waiting, something felt wrong. My mom would be done with shower and would probably be in bed with me, but I could still see someone walking around the bathroom and hear stuff moving in the bathroom. At one moment I decided to check what was going on in the bathroom. When I entered there was no one. I just saw an open drawer and some stuff moved. Lived in a few hundred-year-old house in a seriously old village. Oldest house there was built in the 1400s. I was around 5/6 and moved out when I was 11. In the first year I was in an extension on the house. My bedroom was over next door's kitchen, if that makes sense. My bedroom door was fine on the hinges, but it kept being pushed open. It couldn't physically open without the handle being pushed down, so there was no explanation for this. I switched rooms so me and my sister were in the room over our house. Mirrors would flip out of desks and other things would fall over randomly, with again no explanation. Footsteps would be heard from upstairs. There was always a weird atmosphere too, like you knew something was there. If my whole family didn't experience the same things, then I wouldn't have believed it. We always heard the name Walter being said. In primary school, one of my friend's granddad used to live in our village growing up. He asked which house we lived in and we said. He then said, "Oh, that was Walter's house." That kind of set it in stone for us that something was seriously up. It never hurt us. I think it was just having fun. My younger sister made claims of the woman who played with her teddies when she was around too. I personally don't think a 2-year-old would lie about this. My mom saw a young boy sitting on our steps too, and she definitely wouldn't make that up. The atmosphere was the scariest part personally. When a house is haunted and I go in, I can feel it now, if that makes sense. Pretty cool sixth sense to have, lol. So I don't know if this counts as paranormal or anything, but there's a guy at a church that I would used to go to that would just start screaming during sermons, around 20-ish. Don't know if there's any mental problems, but I went to a bathroom during a sermon and he's in there too. He starts yelling and screaming, and when I look at him, his eyes are bloodshot red. I quickly ran out of there. This will probably get buried, but here it is. I was living in Barcelona in an apartment. My roommate left for work without me. He came to my room to ask if I wanted to tag along. I told him I'd sleep a bit more, so I was home alone. I suddenly woke up and saw a man opening my door. At first I thought my friend had come back, but the figure was taller. If I recall correctly, the door closed and I was petrified. I called my roommate name, no answer. Then it hit me, it could be a burglar who came in broad daylight. I went to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife I could find and went through every room. The place was quite big. My heart was pounding. I checked every large closet. I suspected he may have hid inside. I didn't find anyone. One of my friend had things stolen from his flat before, and they used an X-ray, yes, the hard plastic film, to unlock the door. Apparently it's super common. The police even showed him how they do it. 2 things. I grew up in a farmhouse built in 1898 that had a chimney. For some reason I was looking into the chimney and saw a bag-looking thing. So I reached in to grab it, and when I did, something grabbed me. I ended up with bruises all the way around my wrist, and there were teeth in the small burlap baggie. The second thing was, me and a friend were out hunting in one of his dad's fields. This particular field was completely surrounded by woods, and he was on one side and I was on the other, both of us looking towards the end of the field where we had spotted deer. Something that had predator-like camo, making no sound or anything, hovered in the middle of the field between us. It looked like a constant heat wave distorting the fog, and maybe it was cause it caused a lot of moisture in the air in that area to condense into droplets that you could hear hitting the crop. I don't know what it was because I don't believe in UFOs. I honestly couldn't grasp the size or shape of the object, but it seemed like something was there. My Girl Guides group used to meet in the elementary school library, where there was an ongoing rumor that one of the custodians died under the school, and you could see him opening and closing doors as he walked through the school, that you could hear his breathing and the keys on his belt jingle as he continued his job even in the afterlife. This rumor was around for as long as I attended this school. Several times when my guide group was leaving the library, a chair or two would fall off the desk. We used to say it was the ghost getting angry that we were leaving. My mother was one of the guide leaders, so I would almost always leave last. When we were wrapping up a meeting one night, a friend and I were hanging out in the library reading the books while the other girls were getting picked up. My mother called for us from down the hall and we got up to leave, and as we walked out the door, every single chair crashed to the ground and the power bumped. As cliche as that sounds, I think about that ghost a lot. Whether or not he was ever real, after my grade graduated to high school, his activity stopped completely and he was slowly forgotten. I don't think his stories are told anymore in the school. A lot of the staff retired and were replaced, and my age group who would remember him are all graduating or have graduated already, and it honestly feels like I've lost a friend. My dad is a reverend, so we live in a rectory. We found out a bit after we had moved that it was built on an old graveyard. There would be times that I would be in my room and I would hear footsteps coming down the hallway very late at night, but when I would stick my head out nobody would be there. However, as soon as I would close my door I could hear them again. I'm a teen mom, so that's why I live with my parents and siblings, but there would be times only me and my son, who is only 8 months old, so he couldn't have done any of this, would be home alone, and that's when the paranormal activity mostly happened. Like how I would go downstairs from my room and there would be paper and books flying at us off the shelves. There would also be so many times where my mom's guitar would randomly start playing when we were sitting near it. Sometimes the TV would turn on by itself. One of the scariest things I will always remember are one day when my siblings and parents were out and my aunt took my son out, so I was up in my room reading a book. I went downstairs to get a glass of water and the TV suddenly turned on. When it turned on, the volume went to max and the words "You're not alone" sounded throughout the house. I tried to run out of the house, but the door was locked and the key was not by the door, which is strange since we always leave the key beside the door on the table. I ended up running through the back door, but as I was running could see the figure of a person behind me through the reflection in a window. I ended up getting out though. I also remember one time I was changing my son and I heard a lot of glass smashing downstairs. We were alone at this time as well. When I went downstairs I brought my camogie stick with me in case it was an intruder. But when I went downstairs there was nobody. There was glass all over the living room floor, but no windows were smashed or anything. It just kind of appeared. Another night my bedroom door flung open and I grabbed my son and ran to my oldest brother's room, and when I brought it up in breakfast the next morning everyone denied having anything to do with it. Later that night a bloody knife was left outside my door. I checked the hallway and there was a trail of blood on the floor. I ran straight to my brother's room, but when we went back it was gone. The next morning my son was covered in blood, crying, but he didn't have any cuts on him. There are so many other stories, but those were the ones that scared me the most. We still live in a house, but I don't stay alone as often. I went to a Catholic school and they did lots of missionary work. I grew up in a developing country. We could join them for a week during winter vacation, and even though I wasn't a religious person, I decided to go. They sent my group to a village in the mountains. The people from the village told us we could stay in an abandoned factory. It used to be a vegetable processing plant, but they decided to close the place a while ago, and yes, it looked exactly like an abandoned factory from horror movies, blinking fluorescent lights and long, steel tables. On the second night, I couldn't sleep because it was cold and I stayed awake looking at the roof. And that's when the lights appeared. 9 luminous squares appeared on the wall. They spun around the 4 walls and disappeared. And then appeared again, spun around the room and disappeared. This happened at least 3 times and I didn't see them again. There were no windows in the room, and none of my classmates or the head teacher had their phones on. After that, I just closed my eyes and forced myself to sleep because I didn't know what else to do. The next day, during breakfast, I asked my group of 7 people if they had seen the lights, to make sure I hadn't imagined them, and yes, all of us had seen the lights, even the teacher who was also a former priest. But each one of us described them in a different way. I saw 9 squares, a friend saw 4, others saw a thick, horizontal line, and so on. I still don't know what they were, but this definitely was the scariest thing I've ever experienced. I was like 3 years old. We used to live in Shibuya at that time and my mom was a single mother. Once she slept at around 10 p.m. I'd play for a bit with my stuffed toys I had as a kid for a few next minutes until my mom forced me to sleep afterwards. But this day my mom didn't tell me to sleep, so I guess I kept playing with my stuffed toys for quite long. I wasn't even able to understand the time or clock at that age, so I didn't feel scared or anything. But after a while, there was no wind yet out, curtains started blowing suddenly. I went to check on that curtain. Just then but I got trapped inside the curtain, like I was trying to escape but I wasn't able to. The curtain wrapped itself around me. I started feeling dizzy at that moment, and the next day, I wake up on the exact same spot but I'm sleeping on the floor. My mom asked me, "How did you went there?" Then I remembered everything what happened that night and started crying. She thought it was pretty funny, so she didn't care much. I sometimes think it was a dream too because it's so silly. But aren't we supposed to forget dreams after a while? Then why is this memory locked into my brain since 16 years? I shared this once before on here. I've been on my old laptop and I had decided it was time to catch some shut-eye. Normally, when I close my eyes I see these red and blue closed-eye hallucinations. They move left to right and disappear pretty fast. But when I closed my eyes this time there were none. Instead I saw a ring of white light. Then I realized it wasn't a ring of light at all, it was a circular shape backlit. The image faded like after images do and I saw something murky. Like two dim lights getting closer and closer. As it got closer, I began to see more definition. They weren't lights, they were reflections off of a pair of dark glossy surfaces that were surrounded by a beige-colored shape. Finally, what came into focus were two large, black, empty, void-like eyes. It was the face of what is commonly described as a gray. I immediately felt terrified and disgusted of this thing. It was right in my face and I wanted it to leave or run away from it. I opened my eyes feeling very uncomfortable. I leaned over and joking told the Discord server I'm in that the aliens might have gotten me, but I laughed it off. I closed my eyes again and a few minutes later went to sleep. While I didn't see the face again, though I can still picture it if I think about it, every time I think about it since it's happened I get this uneasy knot in my stomach. I've had plenty of horrifying dreams and nightmares and none of them have left me with that kind of lingering tension. Some suggested it might have been sleep paralysis, but I never had the chance to actually fall asleep the first time I closed my eyes. My laptop was right there and open, it hadn't even gone to sleep yet. It didn't feel like it was something happening in the moment. Honestly, it felt more like a memory that had strong negative emotions attached to it, like the after image had triggered something I'd forgotten. I don't know. I won't ever say it 100% was legit. I can't prove anything one way or another. But, real or not, it still bugs me when I think about it. My dad is a truck driver. When he was about 6 to 7. One time we went on a trip together running Kroger to Nashville, TN from Louisville, KY. When we were crossing the state line a little bit into TN a huge storm rolled in. Now my dad has been a truck driver ever since he was 18 and he was 45 when this happened, so he had a lot of experience with storms. But even he thought it was too rough, so we pulled into a weighing station and right as he shut the truck off I saw out my window a small funnel trying to form a tornado. Luckily it didn't. But was probably the scariest thing that has happened to me so far. I heard what I think was a Sasquatch. I woke up in the middle of the night, on a camping trip, to what sounded like a monkey howling in the woods. Whatever it was made an echo. I grew up in the woods and I know what different animals sound like. This guttural primate whooping was different. Not something you'd hear in Pennsylvania. I read tarot, and when I was doing a reading one day I asked about any spirits being around me and the cards indicated that there was. Didn't think much of it, to be honest, until weird stuff started happening. I would wake up in the middle night feeling like I'm choking, things around my room would move. I'm an only child and my parents don't go into my room. The weirdest thing was when I was home alone one night, came downstairs and 3 candles were lit. I swear on my life I didn't light them. Went back upstairs to grab my phone to take a picture, but when I came down they were out and my dog was barking at thin air. It really creeped me out. When I was a kid I had a best friend who I spent all my time with. I went to her house every Friday for a sleepover. This went on for years until there was a time when we didn't see each other for a few weeks due to her having some family issues. Before, she had 2 beds in her room from when a family member used to live with them, so when I slept over I always slept in the other bed. So I went to sleep over for the first time in a few weeks and she had gotten rid of the second bed that she used to have, so this time we decided to sleep downstairs in her living room, which we had never done before. We slept in her sofa together at opposite ends but only had 1 blanket between the 2 of us for some reason. She fell asleep pretty quickly and hogged all the blankets, so I was pretty cold and couldn't sleep. I was lying there for about half an hour trying to get to sleep when suddenly this piano music started playing. I didn't know where it was coming from, but I was very freaked out. I stood up and walked around the room to see if I could locate where the sound was coming from, but couldn't figure it out. Everywhere I was in the room the sound seemed to be just as loud and like it was coming from somewhere else. I walked towards the door to see if it was coming from outside the room, but it seemed like it was quieter out there, though I only got about a step outside before I felt too creeped out and ran back to the sofa and laid back down. I then tried to wake my friend, but she was always a deep sleeper and I couldn't wake her up. So I eventually gave up and just laid down in the room listening to the creepy music. It took about 15 minutes for the music to stop. I did manage to fall asleep afterwards, and in the morning when my friend finally woke up I told her all about it and she didn't know where the music could have come from either. We looked all around her house and her mom helped us too, but we couldn't find anything that could have made the sound. This was about 10 years ago and I still don't know what happened, but I still think about it to this day and I don't think I'll ever find out what happened. I don't know if this counts as paranormal, but it's certainly creepy and unexplained. What do you guys think? My light just turned on by itself. I wasn't scared at the time props because I was too young to understand, but now it scares the sherbet out of me. Those light switches aren't too easy to turn on and would have taken a substantial amount of concentrated force to do so. My parents always said that side of our old house was haunted. Now, I realize that if that's what one of the harmless ghosts can do, what can the aggressive ones do? E.g. poltergeists and elementals. Okay, so in my grandparents' house they had this fireplace. One night I wake up to get some water. When get out of my room I look at the fireplace for a minute. I was glaring at it because I was weird and then just lit on fire. Don't know how it happened, just know I'm not telling that to no one. I'll take to my grave. I was about 6 at the time and my grandfather wouldn't read me a book. Being the little impatient brat I was, I stormed out of the kitchen and into their guest room with tears in my eyes. It was connected to a small bathroom with 2 small doors that open in. I'm sitting near the doors, crying, and I shit you not, these 2 little doors go void black. No features, no texture, nothing, can't see anything behind them either. And from the darkness in front of me, I hear this deep voice ask me if I'm okay. I'm so confused at this point, and stop crying entirely as I'd taken whatever just appeared in front of me. As soon as I stop crying, the doors go right back to normal, as if it never happened. I run up to the doors and open them, trying to process what the hell I just experienced, and they obviously work as normal. Nobody is in the bathroom, and there's no sign of anyone or anything in the rest of the house. It wasn't the scariest interaction I've had with the paranormal, but it's the most direct interaction I've ever had. When I was 11, when my cousins came to stay over and they brought an Ouija board with them. We tried it and a spirit named George responded. I was sure that it was my cousins messing with, so I stopped playing and went back to bed. But that night when I was sleeping I heard a sound. I opened my eyes and saw that my door was opened and a man was standing in my doorway. He then lit a matchstick, brought it closer to his face. I was so scared that I couldn't even make any noise or move a muscle. After a few seconds the light from the matchstick slowly dimmed, so did the man. I ran from my room to my parents' room. When I told them what happened they came to the room to check and they found an unlit matchstick. The next day when I talked to my cousins they swear that they were not pranking me with the Ouija board. Years later I still ask them if they did that. The answer is still a no. I like to believe it was a hallucination or sleep paralysis, but I still sleep with a small light on. In my parents' house, had multiple occurrences when alone. Notable instances were: 1. Went to the basement to get something. Was the afternoon, and entered unfinished part of the basement that is those small basement windows, so just a bit of light is coming in. Got whatever I needed and went to leave. As I went to close the door to that part of the basement, I swear I saw a shadow of a person standing in the middle of the unfinished room. Closed that door ASAP and booked it upstairs. 2. Was watching TV, when I heard very audible footsteps coming down the stairs from 2nd floor, which were in complete view, and nothing was on them. Definitely didn't sound like house settling or the like, sounded exactly like someone coming slowly down the steps. 3. Was with family dog in my bedroom on 2nd floor, when I heard what sounded like glass breaking. I know I didn't imagine it, since the dog immediately perked up and stared out my door. Grabbed something in case I needed to defend myself, and went throughout whole house. Found absolutely nothing broken, even checked all the cabinets to make sure a glass cup didn't fall. I was once home alone for a few hours and I was upstairs in my room, and downstairs I heard my mom shout my name, only to get text that she would be home in 15 minutes, then I heard it again and that's when I freaked. I shut my door and called my mom, and when she got home, I finally went downstairs. To this day I still have no idea what that was, but I think someone was trying to lure me somewhere or something. I saw my dead grandfather the day after he died sitting in his wheelchair. It wasn't just for a moment. I saw him for a good 30 seconds right in front of me before turning around completely terrified. Nothing like that has ever happened to me ever since. It's been 10 years. Back in like 2011, I was at the mall with my best friend, done shopping, and walking back to the parking garage. On the way there, There was an old lady on a bench. When we passed her, she let out the most horror-filled gasp, grabbed my arm and looked at me with absolute fear in her eyes. I wasn't close to her either, I was about 1.5 feet away. She literally jumped up to grab my arm. After a couple of seconds, she let go, and my friend and I power walked away cause we thought it would be too rude to just sprint. When we were a safe distance though, my friend just yelled, "What was that?" For a while after my father's death, my microwave would set itself to 10 to 30 seconds and just start. Once or twice a day, as far as I could check. Started leaving its door open or plugging it out. A woman I knew then told me that was the spirit of my father, trying to say something. I despised that comment but carried it around with me. Microwave stopped doing that after a little milk accident and a thorough cleaning. So there I had my non-paranormal answer. Still keeping its door open to avoid possible accidents. I had a dream about being in a fire. Woke up in the morning and my bed was actually on fire due to a short-circuit fault of the socket behind the bed. Happened in my second week of a 6-month stay in the Dominican Republic. There were no fire extinguishers or anything. While home alone, I looked at the end of a hallway and saw the body of a specter walk from one room to another, leave that room and come walking towards me. I used to work at a gas station with a friend of mine, and it was about closing time. It was pretty slow night, not a lot of people came in. I was up at the register just in case someone showed up, and my friend was in the kitchen getting it closed up. I stood looking out the window, and there was this predatory animal growl that happened right next to my ear. Sent chills down my spine. I looked around and no one was there besides the two of us, and I still can't explain it to this day. Never happened again after that. My mom and I just got home from hanging out all evening. It was only us two home when we got back. We went upstairs to her room, continuing our conversation from the car, and we heard the garage door opening. One of us stated Dad was home. He worked second shift, except the noise was longer than your typical garage door opening and closing. So I went out to check the garage. The door was shut with no car in it. The noise continued. I walked out further and saw the air compress was on. Not the digital type where they are automatically turned on to reach the min set SI. The lever has been moved to the up/on position. I moved the lever back down so fast and sprinted the hell out of there and back up the stairs. I actually have a few paranormal things I can talk about, not all scary though. My mom is usually away from home quite often, and when I was younger, 10-15 years old, she would make me stay over my grand's house. My grand's house is extremely old, 300 years old in fact, and the interior is very old-fashioned. Entering it always gave me a sinister feel. It wasn't just me being scared of the dark or anything, because I'd still have this fear even during the day. The house is quite large, well, huge in my opinion, and with quite a lot of land. My gran has had her heating system redone many times as the house for some reason never ever heats up. She eventually gave up and uses a gas fire thing. There is no Wi-Fi in the house, only in the kitchen, which my granddad built as an extension when they moved there. The kitchen is the only place in the house that feels safe. The rest of the house walls are too thick for Wi-Fi to reach, which is why it's only in the kitchen, I think anyway. But this means I don't have access to the internet, and my phone is pretty much useless in the rest of the house because there is also no reception. Anyway, I'd stay there usually every weekend and sometimes during the weekdays. I had my own large room too. I am an active sleeper, meaning I often sleep talk, but I very rarely sleepwalked, until I started sleeping there. I'd often find myself waking up downstairs in my grandfather's chair, or in the fancy sitting room in the back of the house at like 1 to 4 a.m. I had no recollection of going there, so obviously I sleepwalked, but I didn't even remember falling asleep. I always had a tough time sleeping in my grand's, as it just have a flight or fight instinct constantly stopping me from sleeping, but then I'd wake up in a different room with no memory of when I slept or anything. Scary thing is, there are no street lamps nearby, so the house would be pitch black and it would be so cold that my phone would die from the cold, so it'd usually have no light source and it'd wander back upstairs stumbling in the dark. When trying to fall asleep, I'd always hear strange sounds, and it wasn't just me. My mom used to when she slept here, her friend, my aunt, my cousins, everyone heard these sounds and had weird experiences. The wallpaper would move as if animated, and it would be like someone was walking outside my door in the hallway, and then turning on the tap in the bathroom and creaking open the doors. My gran always had them shut at night, not sure why. Quite often though, I'd stare at my door and suddenly it would be pushed open. Not enough for me to see the other side, but just the tiniest crack open. I stopped closing my door after a while cause I hated it. Things escalated however. I'd get so scared, I'd close my eyes and pretend I was dead or asleep. I couldn't even breathe due to the fear of being noticed by whatever was walking around. But whatever it was, it started coming in my room, as if it was getting braver to approach me, or maybe toying with me. Anyway, I'd have my eyes tight shut and it'd be as still as a corpse, and suddenly I'd feel extreme pressure/weight on my upper legs, as if a full-grown human had sat on them. This happened quite often, and the freaky thing is, my mom told me she also experienced this when young. It would also feel like something was breathing on my face and touching my hand. It was extremely creepy, not just in a paranormal sense, but as a young girl it felt really weird and uncomfortable, as if this thing had very wrong intentions, if you know what I mean. Anyway, this went on for ages. It would either lay on me or just sit on me, and I'd still be sleepwalking and waking up in those two rooms. One night however I was done. I didn't want to deal with this crap anymore, and my boyfriend had suggested to me that there might actually be someone living in the walls, and I wanted to get cops involved or literally anyone to help, as I was genuinely terrified. So I started being at the ready with my camera. I had a battery pack for my phone and I'd just have it on charge constantly, as my phone battery would jump from 70% to 20% to 50% to 5% constantly in that house due to the cold. I think this made the thing mad, as it started being more active and more loud. At one point it even pushed my wardrobe, which wobbled a lot, and it was terrifying. I started seeing weird shadows on the ceiling, as if something was moving on it at high speeds, and it'd constantly be taking pictures everywhere, but with no luck, until one day, that is, I took a picture of my ceiling, and in the corner of the picture, there was a weird white thing, like a foot or limb or something. It had no details like toes or nails that I could see. It was just a pale white and slightly blurred, as if it was moving at high speed to avoid the camera. I showed my mom. My boyfriend. I showed quite a few people. My mom started to let me sleep alone at home because of this, and my boyfriend was scared shitless. I only stayed a few nights there after that, and barely anything happened in them, only the noises from the corridor and bathroom, but no interactions with me or my room. Then that was it, never slept there again. About a year after that, my grandfather passed away in the house. The fancy sitting room at the back of the house was turned into a room for him, as we didn't want him spending his last days in hospital. He had motor neuron disease. Something to note about him: he was very strict with how many lights we had on in that house. He'd get angered if too many lights were on, as he was crazy about saving energy and money. Anyway, when he passed away, we had nearly all the lights on in the house, as the whole family was there. But when he passed, all the lights turned off. It was only my grand's house that had this power cut too. The nurses and doctors were so stunned that they left instantly and left the body in the house. After his passing, the sinister feeling I had in the house had gone. Well, not entirely, but it was dulled down. I haven't slept there since, so I don't know if the sounds still happen. My gran is usually fast asleep and has medication that helps her sleep deeply, so she wouldn't know either, but yeah, that's my experience. I've experienced a few odd paranormal things in my life, but my gran's house was by far the most terrifying and extreme. I'm not religious at all, but honestly what I experienced in my gran's made me pray to God out of fear. Going up the stairs of my house with my nanny, I was 6 at the time, we saw a decapitated doll up the stairs, and when we checked the stairs again it was gone. And that was when all paranormal things started to happen. OMG, what have I done? I was in the middle of reading the one where the guy and his girlfriend went to her parents' estate to do some ghost hunting, and they came back and were reviewing the footage. I somehow misclicked and it lost my place. Now I can't find the post. Help me, I need closure. See a doppelganger of my teacher walking down the hall in high school grade 8 when my English teacher was sitting at her desk marking in her classroom. Saw this with friend creepy AF. Never saw the doppelganger again. Wasn't scary per se, but I definitely witnessed a fleet of UFOs passing through rural Kentucky at around 0600. Sun was coming up, I assume because their shift was over or something. They weren't surveilling us so far as I can tell. There were 3, flying in a circular formation W, a leading vessel. Not saucers, ovular. The only thing that really sticks out in my mind is a memory from when I was 4 or 5. I lived at a Salvation Army college with my parents and brother. My folks were training to become Salyan officers. I was in daycare and the youngest kid, Devin, was down for a nap in the nursery. It was a small room with large windows. I was playing with some toys when I heard something that sounded exactly like someone going hoo-hoo, like an owl from inside the nursery. Devin immediately woke up screaming. Not the typical cranky toddler scream, it was a scream of fear and distress. The ladies watching us went to see him and that was that. It's always stuck out in my mind because of the eerie feeling that I got when it happened. The voice was too deep to be either of the two ladies looking after us and it couldn't have been the other kids. I was in my bed when I guess I was around 10 years old. I then had an aquarium in my room, which gave off light in the room. But very slightly. I woke up at night and I saw exactly in shadow all gnomes walking in a row. The length from to my middle, and in the corner of the room I saw a coat rack, but I had no coat rack. When I looked closer it was my father. I called him but did not answer. I got up. I could walk through the walking shadow of gnomes and touched my father with my hand that went right through him. I was so worked up scared I turned around and back in my run turned around with blanket over me. I don't know if it was the light from my then aquarium and the shadow playing in my head, but my father really stood there. I saw him standing there until I got to him and turned away into a shadow. I used to live in Peru back when I was 8. My mother just went to the local market and my dad was working. My mother had some teddy bears and some dolls on top of a trunk on her room. I remember going there to grab a phone I used to play in which was on top of the trunk just besides a baby doll. I remember that scene vividly, me getting closer to the phone and for some reason getting nervous along the way with each step closer. As soon as I was gonna grab it the doll turns her head looking at me. I stayed in shock for a couple of seconds then grabbed the phone and got away. When my mother came home I told her and she decided to throw the doll away. 3 years later when we came to the US and visited my niece she had the same doll, pretty much the same model, clothes, everything. I felt nervous and without anyone seeing me I threw it in the trash. As of today now 17 years old I never saw that doll again. When I was probably around 7 or 8 I would get frequent nightmares and would sleep in my parents' bed a lot. One day I had woken up late so my parents had already started their days. I wasn't ready to get up yet so I just laid there for a while. Right before I had nearly fallen asleep something, about the height of my mom, rushed by the bed. I had absolutely no idea what it was and quickly rushed to my mom and asked her about to which she just brushed it off. I've got more stories although that one is the worst as I have absolutely no idea what it was. I don't think this is paranormal, but it was a weird experience I had one time. My mother tells me I often sleep talk, nearly every night, and occasionally do things, like randomly sit up without any emotion and go back to sleep. I'm never aware when this happens nor do I remember it. However, one time I was aware. I vividly remember getting up to drink water, my mother asking me what I'm doing, and me going back to sleep. But whilst I did this, I felt like I was out of control. Every action I did in those few seconds felt out of my control. I was aware, but I couldn't control my actions. I'm not sure if I just remember incorrectly or it was just a sleep thing, but if something like this is common, can someone explain what happened? How can I be aware of myself but not control myself? Sleep paralysis. I open my eyes at 3:50 a.m. and see something in the corner of my room. A shadowy figure. I can't move at all. All I can do is stare at it till I pass out. My mother always said she grew up in a haunted house. She heard voices, occasionally saw apparitions, the whole 9 yards. None of that really convinced me but apparently she also used to be able to identify where people buried their pets. Even in yards she had never been to, where their pets had been buried years ago, she could tell the exact location of the pet's body. So as a kid like when I was 4 or something I always told my mom that I saw people in my room who cuddled me and stuff and when I was older I also heard different voices so yay. One time, when I was 13, a bright light shined from my bedroom window. It lasted like 2 minutes and when I looked outside I could see nothing. It was like someone had shined a car headlight through the window. It then just suddenly stopped out of nowhere. Considering this is my most paranormal experience, you can assume stuff like this happens rarely. I was 10 or 12, can't remember. I was watching Final Destination with my sister. My sister was holding my younger brother while watching the movie. We had a partition that could be moved. I saw a confused man walking. He held the partition and moved it. He walked for 5 to 6 seconds then proceeded to vanish. I screamed and ran to my neighbor's house with me and my sister crying. The younger brother my sister was holding, experiences dreams about a girl. He says he sees her around the house as well. One day in his dreams she told him not to talk about her anymore. I also once had a sleep paralysis. I was sleeping with my younger brother. My face was facing my younger brother. I saw something like an imp sitting on him. The imp then looked at me. I tried yelling and screaming but I could not move one bit. When the imp vanished I was able to move. I know that sleep paralysis are not paranormal, but I just wanted to add that in there lol. I have many stories as well, I'm too lazy to write them lol. Ever since I was really young, I've always loved writing. My family and I went to Ramsgate for holiday once, which is a place on the coast of South Africa. We were in this honest to the gods, really creepy house. I was sitting by the side of the pool, writing when my pen just flew out of my hand for no reason whatsoever. It just landed in the pool. I just fished it out and went on with my day. A priest told me he once went to a house because it was said it was infested. As soon as he entered he was greeted by the owner of that apartment who immediately started to tell him about the presence. She said it was a child spirit who would sometimes either scare her or, when she would sleep, hug her legs. As it confirmed, shortly after she had ended her narration they heard the door moving. There was no one inside apart from them. The priest called his superiors and they had just begun celebrating the function to banish the spirit when, trying to use the holy water on the bedroom's walls the pictures hung on there moved, so as to avoid the contact with the liquid. When everything finished, the priest went on to investigate the situation and, after some time discovered that a satanic rite was done before the construction of the building. I had a lot I think. When I was a kid we were living in a house when all creepy things happened. I couldn't remember that much about it because I was a kid and mom never told me, so from what I remember was the voices of my family members talking and calling for me every night while they were all asleep in front of me and I had a doll that my parents heard a voice comes from it at night they just mentioned it accidentally in front of me lol. I used to have dreams that I remember till this days, after 15 years, they were too scary and I used to be afraid and can't sleep at night for years. There is much more things happen that mom will never told me. I had more stories from other PPL but I am lazy to type them lol. Ooh. Not so much scary, but goosebumpy. So, my boyfriend lives in a town named after his family name and lives on this dirt road, that is his last name. We live in the house his family built about 200 years ago, it will be 225 years. His aunt passed away in the home and his father passed away in it too. I remember always seeing things out of the corner of my eye, enough to make me turn my head and look and every time I entered the stairwell I always felt like something was watching me. I'm getting goosebumps as I type this lol. About 3 months into the relationship, we are going up the stairs and we get into his room and he looks at me and says, "Do you ever feel like you're truly alone in this house?" And immediately my skin prickled and I just felt a rush overcome me and I said absolutely not. You know, only being 3 months into the relationship, I wasn't gonna be like, hey, there is something with us in this house. He always says I am the rightful heir of this home, they won't hurt us. Alright, now to top everything off, hopefully you made it this far. For about a year, we moved halfway across the country and we had my immediate family stay in the home while we were away and my mom invited one of my troubled cousins to stay with her for the time being. Well, when we came home and they moved out, the cousin had stayed in our room and he had nailed to the door a piece of wood, with an upside down cross in the middle of it. That was when I knew the house truly wasn't empty. Wild lol. They've stopped happening now but it still scares me, multiple stories that add up way too much. One night I went to the bathroom and I saw a handprint on the window. I ran out of the bathroom. The scary thing is that my bathroom is on the second floor. Then another night I was about to go downstairs when I saw a hand on the wall disappear around a corner. I looked over and I saw the bathroom door open. That's creepy I thought, and then it got serious. Another night I heard tapping on my bedroom window while I was trying to sleep. I turned over and saw what I can only explain as a silhouette of me standing there. Mind you, I had a bunk bed back then, so if I wanted to run out of the room it would take too long to get off my bed. Then another night, the last incident for now, after I got rid of my bunk bed. All of these stories have happened far apart by the way. I felt like something was in my room, so I look over at my door and I see a shadow dash from my door to my closet. I had to get my mom to calm me down. That was the first time I had to get my mom in my room over something I saw. Nothing has happened after that, but I'm thinking my bunk bed is haunted. And the last story is whatever haunting it giving me one last scare, but every so often I keep seeing things in the corner of my eye, like right now while I'm writing this. There is another story which I think is weirder than this. One time I was at me dad's house and he wouldn't give me back to me mom, so I was thinking about her and looking at a bell he had by his door, and when I thinked about her the bell rang and I got scared and it stopped, so I think I did telekinesis. The only time something weird and slightly scary that happened was like 17 years ago, when my friend's 3-year-old son came downstairs and looked up at the corner of the room, to the corner of the ceiling, where nothing is, and started smiling and waving and said hi. All of us looked at each other, and since a few of us were high, we bolted outside and freaked out. Lol, still to this day, I never understood that. My dad suffered 6 heart attacks in one night when I was 5 years old, and at 11:58 p.m. when in bed with my mum for comfort I sat bolt upright staring at the bedroom door. I remember hearing a screaming getting louder. My mum didn't hear it, but was scared by my actions at the time. We found out the next day that at 11:58 p.m. Dad died for a few minutes. After doing some research years later, I found out I heard the banshees screaming. My mom owned a daycare when I was younger. It was a residential home that was converted to the daycare center. But before being a house it was actually a crematorium. Super creepy, right? Well, my aunt worked at the daycare and one day during nap time they kept hearing a baby crying. Except, none of the kids were awake. But it sounded like it was coming from up in the attic, so she goes up there and there was a Halloween decoration making the noise. Now it was one of those little ghosts that had a pouch on the front for candy, and when you walked by it would shake, do a little dance and giggle. So she's like, oh, batteries must just be dying. Went to go take out the batteries and turn it off. There were no batteries, noped it right out of there, and that thing got trashed at the end of the day. I grew up in an extremely active house and saw a lot of strange things here and there. I'd if this sounds crazy or not, but it seemed like things came and went in that house. Like it wasn't just one spirit hanging out all the time. Scariest thing that ever happened to me personally was one time I was laying in my bedroom watching TV and heard a mouse coming from the closet. I lived in the country and it was summer and getting field mice in the house wasn't uncommon. So I told my grandma about the mouse so she could set a trap. She came to my room and sat there and said she didn't hear anything. I muted the TV and this mouse sound was non-stop. It was like someone had one of those cat toys that squeaked and was continuously shaking it. And it wasn't soft to where you had to listen to hear it, it was right there. Now at this point I didn't think anything of it. My grandma is a little crazy and will actively look for things to argue about or play stupid for attention, so I don't think much of her saying she didn't hear anything. It's pretty normal behavior for her tbh. Then my grandpa comes in, who is very straightforward, zero bullshit kind of guy. He sits in the chair and we're all in this room listening the whole time, this mouse noise not stopping. He said he didn't hear anything either, but sets a trap anyway. At this point I'm confused because the noise is very loud and this time I hear a slight chuckle in my ear. Being honest, not a lot bothered me, but that really did, to the point I went to my friend's house who lived about 2 miles up the road. There were 4 of us in her house and we were waiting for a 5th who was gonna come over after she got off work. I hadn't mentioned anything about the noise because I don't want to sound crazy. We were hanging out at her kitchen table and around midnight there's a knock on the door. We all run thinking it's our friend showing up, but nobody was out there. We sat back down and everyone just had that weird vibe to it, but nothing more. We left the main door open because the friend should be there soon, so it was just the screen door shut. A few minutes later the knocks happen again, louder and more aggressive this time, rattling the door. We were all sitting there to see there was nothing outside the door to make those knocks. Everyone heard it and we all freaked out. Then the mouse noises started again at my friend's house. I didn't say anything, but nobody there mentioned that they had heard anything like it. The mouse noise only lasted a few seconds this time, but was enough to put me into a panic attack. After that nothing else happens. But that experience scared the ever-loving SHD out of me. I lived my whole life in my grandma's house and I'd see things out of the corner of my eye, or hear mummerings here and there at night, and it took a lot to freak me out. But I'd never had anything like that ever happen to me, and I've never had anything like it since. That was the only time I had ever had anything follow me and I was terrified, even if it was just down the road. But I never heard that mouse or the chuckle again after that night, and that was 6 years ago. I don't tell that story to many people because I don't want anyone to think I'm crazy, but my friends that were there that night believe me. I have a Christmas tree box in my room. There was only ever one time where I looked at during the night, bearing in mind I have my LED lights on, and something looked like it was peeking from the side of it. It looked like a child kind of. I wanna say it was one of my younger siblings messing with me, but not if my siblings had black hair. As a kid, me and my sister shared bunk beds that had the little stairs at the end, not the ladder. One night I woke up, looked in the reflection on the TV and saw someone standing on the top step staring at me. I couldn't move or call for my parents or even my sister. I never told any of my family. We moved out of the house not too long after. Sleep paralysis experience. You're lying in your bed, you're hearing the door opened, the floor creak, and you feel uncomfortable. You start seeing in silhouette of a creature you can't describe in 1,000 words. It pushes you down, whispers into your ear in a language you've never heard, but you still understand that you're messed up. You can't move. Not your arm, not your leg, not your head, not even your finger. The creature sits down on your chest and you feel the weight and you begin to get problems with the breathing. You panic, can't breathe, can't move, and this thing is looking at you. It feels like it's making fun of your weakness. It shows how helpless and weak you are and that it could take you out within seconds. Your mind is getting weird. You feel like someone else. Getting angry for no reason. Suddenly it steps of you, slowly vanishing in the dark. Again you hear every move. You still can't move, still can't breathe. After several minutes you start getting back the ability to move and breathe, but you don't want to move. You hope that this was just a dream and you wish you could forget this, but you'll remember every few years 'cause that thing comes back for you to remember you. Some friends were moving out of a house because too many strange and inexplicable things were happening to them. The last day they had left in the house they asked me to sleep with them and I said no, I don't think so. They replied, come on, you can bring your dog, we can get the beds together and you sleep in the middle with the dog. We were all really very scared. Anyway, I accepted and suddenly in the middle of the night my dog got up and started barking at the corner of the room, where we didn't see anything. I tried to calm him down and pet him, and while I did it his hairs were up like thorns, so we were really scared and the only thing we did was to go to my home in the middle of the night. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.